Good afternoon. You may have heard that Medicaid is changing for Texas residents. So we're coming from you live from People's Community Clinic to explore why. Please feel free to ask questions at any time by typing in the comments. For people who prefer to follow along in Spanish, we are offering a live transcript. Para las personas que prefieren seguir la presentación en español, pueden ver la traducción simultánea en su pantalla. Let's get started. So the COVID pandemic actually began before many people know. On January 27th, 2020, the COVID Federal Public Health Emergency, or PHE for short, was declared. There were actually a lot of changes in law and in government, but for most people, life was pretty normal in January and in February. In fact, it was probably not until March 12th or 13th when things really changed for most people. If your job closed, for instance, it was probably that Thursday or Friday or maybe the weekend when you stopped working. That's also around the time when the world really started to feel different. And so within a few days, Congress passed a bill called the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. This law said that everyone who received Medicaid at that time got to keep their Medicaid until the end of the COVID PHE. And if you became eligible for Medicaid during the PHE, then you also got to keep it until the end of the public health emergency. In other words, Medicaid was linked to the PHE. So why did Congress do this? Well, under normal circumstances, Texas requires everyone to show that they are still eligible for Medicaid at least once per year. Other states do this as well. And for some families, it can be necessary to renew Medicaid twice or even more often during the year. And that leads to a lot of confusion because mail gets lost, deadlines are missed, people get confused, and sometimes the state just misinterprets a form. And that actually means that 7 million people who don't get Medicaid should. And that's a really big problem at a time when we were trying to make sure that everyone gets the care that they need so that more people don't get sick from COVID. And so the federal government told states in the Families First Coronavirus Response Act that people had to be allowed to keep their Medicaid. And that meant that a lot more people were getting Medicaid. In Texas, more than 1.5 million people are now receiving Medicaid compared to before the pandemic. There are many reasons why, but that March 2020 change in law that disallowed enrollment is probably the biggest cause of more people having access to healthcare. And many people think that's a good thing. But because no one knew when the public health emergency would end, it made it hard for insurance companies and for states to make plans. And so in December 2020, Congress passed an omnibus budget bill that changed the rules. That bill said that states no longer had to wait until the end of the public health emergency to review their Medicaid rolls. It did this by unlinking the Medicaid enrollment from the public health emergency. The law also said that states had to wait until April 1st to start reviewing their Medicaid enrollment. And that, in a nutshell, is what everyone is talking about when they say that Medicaid is changing. By the way, the COVID public health emergency is slated to end next week on May 11th. That's because fewer people are being hospitalized and fewer people are dying from COVID. In other words, we might expect that COVID will continue to be around, but the emergency has passed. And just because the emergency has passed, you can still do your part by washing your hands regularly. It is now estimated that almost 15 million people could lose Medicaid starting at the end of this month, at the end of May. That's about 1 in 8 people who benefit from Medicaid right now. Most people will need to be proactive if they want to keep their Medicaid. So what can you do? First, It's critical to make sure that the state agency that administers Medicaid, the Health and Human Services Commission, or HHC for short, has your current information. After all, if you've moved, how will you get your mail? Second, you need to be on the lookout for a notice to renew, or to provide more information. And third, you need to make sure that you fill out all the forms you are sent as soon as possible. Let's talk more about each of these steps. So there are 3 ways to make sure that your information is current. First, you can go to yourtexasbenefits.com to update your account. If you don't have an online account, you can make one by clicking Log In and then clicking Create an Account. If you've forgotten your password, you can click Forgot Password after you click Log In. Second, there's an app for that. You can go to the Google Play Store if you have an Android device, or to the App Store if you have an Apple device. And then just search for Your Texas Benefits to find the correct app. Install and set up your account. Third, you can call 211 or dial 877-541-7905. No matter which number you call, the first prompt is to choose your language, and the next prompt is pretty long, but you can just plan to press 2. So HHSC has started reaching out to some people already, but others will be contacted in the coming months. There are a variety of notices that you may receive, but this is an example. You can always look for Texas Health and Human Services Commission at the top to know that it's a message from HHSC. Now, the notices are going to be mailed in a yellow envelope that says Action Required in red. Here's a bigger picture. If you've signed up to receive notices electronically, then you won't get the yellow envelope. I recommend that even if you have not gotten an envelope or an electronic notice, that you double check at the beginning of every month. You can do this by logging into your Texas Benefits account and then click Select Details for your case. And if it's time to renew your benefits, it will say Yes in the Time to Renew column. If you don't have access online or through the mobile app, you can call 211 and then again, choose your language and then pick option 2, just like I mentioned if you want to update your information. However you receive the notices, make sure you complete and return those forms as soon as possible. If you need help and are a patient of People's Community Clinic, you can schedule an appointment to meet with a Medicaid specialist by calling 512-478-4939. HHSC is planning to stagger Medicaid redeterminations over multiple months. They will prioritize redeterminations for people who are not likely to continue to qualify for Medicaid. In other words, there are groups of people whose life circumstances have changed in a way that makes it likely that they don't qualify for Medicaid. This is because only certain categories of people qualify for Medicaid in Texas. So who do we expect to be in that first group? Well, people who are expecting can get Medicaid. But if you're no longer pregnant, you're no longer eligible for the type of Medicaid for pregnant people. And so this population is part of the first group who likely has actually already received their notices. Second, Medicaid is not generally available for adult Texans. And this means that when a child gets old enough, when they become an adult, they age out of being eligible for Medicaid. So young adults are also likely to be in that first group who have probably already received a notice. Third, Some Texas adults who do get Medicaid are eligible only because they don't make very much money and may have a child who is eligible. If that child is now an adult or has moved out of the household and is living with someone else, then the adults will no longer qualify. And that means that they are also part of that first group of folks to receive a notice. Now, there may be others. Remember, the important thing is that you have to provide the information requested when your notice arrives. But I wanted to highlight a few populations that probably were already sent notices just in case you've missed it. The second group that we expect to start seeing notices this month and next month is a little bit difficult to describe. Now, many people believe that Medicaid is just one program, but it's actually a whole bunch of programs. And so this second group who may start to see notices soon are people who are likely to no longer be eligible for their current type of Medicaid, but they may be eligible for a different type of Medicaid. What are some examples? Well, kids who will move from Medicaid to the Children's Health Insurance Program, also known as CHIP, might be one example. Parents or caretakers who weren't working but now are is another population. There are people in certain waiver groups who may get notices in the next month or two, and others. Again, as long as you are responding to the notice to renew or the notice for more information when you get it, you don't have to worry too much about these details. Now, the third group is really everyone else. We think it will probably be later this summer or fall even before everyone else receives their notices. That's because this last group are people who are most likely to remain eligible for Medicaid. Two examples are people over the age of 65 and adults who are receiving a disability payment from the Social Security Administration, including SSI. Now, the bottom line is that you must respond to the notice to renew or the notice for more information when you get it. But for groups like these, it may be a few months before that notice arrives. Still, I recommend checking your account online or by phone monthly just to make sure that your notice isn't missed. So what happens if you get a notice that says that you are losing your Medicaid and you think that's wrong? Well, it is really important to understand that most decisions about Medicaid can be appealed if you disagree. This is also true for programs like food stamps, TANF, and SSI. This means that if your application is denied or your benefits are cut, you can appeal. You can also appeal if your doctor or clinician says that you need a medication or treatment and Medicaid says no. In any of these cases, you can write a letter to HHSC telling them that you want to file an appeal. You can also call 211 or you can visit your local office. I recommend that if you write a letter, you make sure that you have tracking like the type that's provided by the United States Postal Service. And if you go into the office, have them give you proof that you filed your appeal. This is important because appeals have to be filed pretty quickly or you lose your right to one. Now, if your appeal is denied, you can contact the Health and Human Services Ombudsman at 877-787-8999, or you can visit hhs.texas.gov/ombudsman. And if you're a patient at People's Community Clinic, there's a special kind of lawyer who may be able to help you at no cost to you. Just ask any member of your healthcare team for a referral to the Medical Legal Partnership. 15 million people across the U.S. are expected to lose Medicaid as a result of all of these changes. And at least half of those will be because people have trouble with this process, because they've moved but didn't update their address or something similar. Don't be one of those people. Make sure your contact information is up to date. Be on the lookout for yellow envelopes or electronic notices, and make sure you complete and return all notices on time. Now, it looks like we've got some questions in the chat. Feel free to add yours. So one question I see is a question about someone has lost their password to Your Texas Benefits, and they ask, how can they get help? Well, to reset your password, you'll go to yourtexasbenefits.com and click Log In. Select Forgot Password, enter your username, and then click Continue. You'll get a code by email or text, depending on how you've chosen to receive contact. And then you just enter that code to reset your password. You can also reset your password through the Your Texas Benefits mobile app. You can call 211, or you can go to an HHSC benefits office. Another question is, what can I do if I am expecting a renewal letter but have moved before receiving it? You can update your information online at yourtexasbenefits.com, and you can also call 211 or use the mobile app. If you log into your account, then you can check under the column that says time to renew. And if it is indeed time to renew, then you will see the word yes. And that'll let you follow up, and you'll know that you may have missed a notice. Here's another question. What type of information is typically required to renew coverage? Are the forms very involved? So the information that is needed to renew coverage will vary depending on your situation, but it's typically information about who you live with and how much money you earn. There may be other questions if you get Medicaid based on a medical condition, for instance. Are the forms very involved? Well, some of them are pretty long, but they're also pretty simple if you just take it step by step and go box by box. And remember, if you need help, you can get assistance if you're a patient at People's Community Clinic. We have another question about other programs. And the person writes, my neighbor gets SNAP, and I know that all of those kids would really struggle to have healthy food without it. So are other programs affected? This is a great question. So SNAP benefits were reduced a few months ago, and it is for reasons related to the ending of the public health emergency. But the changes in SNAP are actually not connected to the changes in Medicaid. And so that means that SNAP renewals are going to continue during this unwinding of the continuous coverage under Medicaid. And so you do need to respond to agency requests related to your SNAP benefits. That's also true if you get, for instance, TANF, or the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. Another question is about families with CHIP. How are they affected and what should they do? Well, CHIP is kind of like a type of Medicaid in so many ways. But if your child is receiving CHIP, they're not going to see a change in benefits just because of the changes to Medicaid. Instead, kind of like SNAP, the CHIP renewals will continue through this unwinding of Medicaid, this unlinking of Medicaid. And so you do need to make sure you respond to any agency requests for more information or for renewal related to CHIP benefits. Someone else asks, how can I know if my child's Medicaid is switching from Medicaid to CHIP? And what is the difference between the two? There really are a lot of programs, and so we can definitely get confused. So how will you know if your child is moving from Medicaid to CHIP? Well, you'll get a notice that says pretty much just that. HHSC will want more information, probably in particular about your household income, because that's the major difference between Medicaid and CHIP. Medicaid has income caps that are lower. In other words, Medicaid serves the poorest of the poor. And CHIP serves people who earn a little bit more money. So the things that those forms tend to ask about are really strongly related to who lives in your household and how much money is everyone earning. It looks like we've come to the end of the questions. But if you continue to have any other questions, don't hesitate to put them in the comments and I'll follow up as I'm available. You can also expect to see a link to the People's Community Clinic YouTube channel soon, and that will let you share this presentation with your friends. Until next time, be well.